Hello, everybody. This is Justine Case of American Newscape, rejoining our friend Scott Dudley, modeling his favorite cat shirt for American consciousness. Hello, Scott. Welcome back to American Newscape.
Hey, welcome everyone. It's always good to be here, and we are your sounding board of American consciousness. So
Well,
before you take the dive, you don't want to take a deep dive into something that's really shallow. You can bust your nose or your neck. So we are the sounding board. We kind of sound it out. And if it's deep, then we'll take the deep dive. If it's shallow, maybe we'll just kind of ease in with our toes.
yeah, we'll look for another place to enter the water.
Hey, we are going to break the internet on this show. So I just want to point out ahead of time, just in case we break the internet, send all of the bills and criticisms to just in case.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We'll post the address in the comments,
Care of Luna.
right?
Right.
So, and the reason I'm saying that, I'm kind of teasing it, but the reason I'm saying that is because, as par for the course, really, as we've been developing into this, I start talking to people about that. I say, here's what we're going to talk about. What do you think? And I get stuff that maybe we need to touch upon, but I get opinions. And I really ask a wide variety of people. This one really, really resonated. Everybody had something to say. And most of it was different than the person next to them and what they had to say. So the topic today is how you shine. And before you go all Stephen King on me, it's not about the shining. But it could be, because if that was part of what you had, and I have not met a lot of dyed-in-the-wool true psychics, so it's pretty rare. But if that's part of what you had, then you would have to decide, how much of this do I want to let out of the bag? How much of this do I want to shine onto the rest of the world? Because if I overshine the shining, I may find myself in some very soft-walled areas with limited freedom and right. So
Luna.
that was Luna looking over at me, going, "That wasn't that funny, dude."
Well, no, exactly, because Luna is indeed psychic. And if you don't believe me, ask Luna.
Cats got a knack. They're good at this.
So,
So we're going to talk about the shine. But the funny thing was, the minute I kind of realized it wasn't really Stephen King and I needed to kind of reroute the topic, I was driving down the road listening to my favorite AM radio show. And what did I hear? Dun, 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 instant karma's gonna get you. And it was like, we all shine on. And that was like, oh, that's kind of it. You see, Justin, we've got all these talents. We've got intellect, we've got beauty, we've got style, we've got cool, we've got grace, we got compassion, we got up and down and sideways. We've got a million different things that we've got. And it's like we're sitting at this DJ board, we're sitting at this mix board, and we're adjusting all our levels to try to hit it right with the universe. And that was the question to people. Do you shine as hard as you can shine? And if not, why not? And how does that work? Do you mix your levels differently, and why do you do it? Everybody had a different answer.
well, I'll assume nobody said they shined as bright as they could.
Sort of.
Whoa.
Because take Michael Jordan, for example. He was shining as bright as he could when he was on the basketball court.
Yeah, but
And part of that was his competitive nature, part of that was his practice ethic, and part of that was his talent.
But that was a limited area for Michael Jordan because he had other issues in his life, as we all do.
So you're bringing up a really good point, and that is that there's a lot of circumstantial context to shining. So there may be spots where we just full out, let it go, give it all you got, let the world see your brilliance. And there are other spots where we tone it down, turn it off, hide it even. And that was kind of what came out of talking to a lot of different people about this. Interestingly,
Well, Scott, I've always been a proponent of, if you're going to evolve, you need to let the chinks in your armor out, so to speak, which we all have chinks. But if I want to enhance, if I want to improve, if I want to involve, that needs to be open to a part of the world, not necessarily the whole world, but certainly your inner circle and your world. But this is a great topic.
well, you bring up a really important point, and this is something that really popped a lot with almost everyone, was how much I choose to shine is regulated by the degree of safety I feel in whatever environment we're talking about. So if I don't feel secure, if I don't, and this is interesting. This is kind of where I got this topic because I grew up. I was blessed. I grew up with grandparents and parents who loved my shine, who thought nothing better of me when I was shining as brightly as I could. Now, I'd figure out later on in life that didn't hold true for the rest of the world. But growing up as a kid, it was like I was always encouraged to just do that. And because of that, I felt really safe. I felt really secure. So I learned where my end game was. I really learned what I could do when I took off all the filters, when I took off the governor and I just floored it. And I don't think everybody gets that.
No, I don't. Yeah, you're exactly right. I don't think a lot of people feel self-confident enough, secure enough to adopt that persona. If we talk about our childhood, I was raised to give it a try, even when my parents knew I might fail. But how did that
Yeah,
help? That helped me evolve because as an adult, I was never afraid to fail. And that's another aspect of, this life. I've always prided myself in answering direct questions. I may not offer all the information, but if somebody poses a direct question to me and they need an answer, they're going to get it.
so you never failed for like lack of effort. If I'm going down in flames.
Well, exactly. I'm not going to be ashamed of who I am, what I am, my shine, so to speak. And that's a good way to put it. I'm not going to be ashamed of it. Can it be better? Absolutely. But, I'm ready to dance the dance with what it is today and hopefully improve it for tomorrow.
Yeah, it's interesting for me. I want to kind of, I talked about later on having to figure out that not everybody wanted me to shine as brightly as I could.
Oh,
And for my own self-defense, for my own protection, I had to learn how to modulate, right?
okay.
And I sadly that was government work.
Right.
I would show up every day at work going, until everybody in my community has mental health that lets them get through the day and feel okay about themselves, I'm going to bust my butt and put all of my creativity to work and put all of my ingenuity to work and put all of my effort to work to sort it out, because there's got to be an answer. And that didn't go over big in government. And it took me a while to figure it out, right?
Well, yeah, if you heal all these people, Scott, what are we going to do for a living?
Well, there was that angle, but the other angle was, one person's bright idea is another person's, threatened comeuppance, and you're kicking sand into their castle and knocking stuff over. And for me, it was like I was this little kid who was like, always do your best, always, it was like be loyal and follow the law of the pack. I took all that stuff really seriously. And now I'm running into this environment where, yeah, maybe if I take my foot off the gas, everybody's going to be a little bit happier, and they're not going to like take stuff out on me.
Well, maybe I'm lucky, Scott, because when I first met you years ago, you always shine brightly, and you were who I believed you were, and there was no shame in that. You and I are both an acquired taste, And we both have different types of personas, but I think we respect each other, and that's why we're doing this.
Yeah, I love the fact that I learned so much from you because it's stuff that I really hadn't thought of it that way. And then I'm like, yeah, and I don't have to like throw my stuff away and jump on the bandwagon,
No.
but I can use it to inform and make my stuff richer. And that's kind of, I think that's why I like everybody to shine. To be honest, I was never threatened by somebody else shining. I love it when people shine.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, if you don't, then you're going to start to develop these tendencies of jealousy and not celebrating who you are. You know, and that's important for me. I want everybody to celebrate who they are in their own hearts before they worry about how I perceive them. Because if they are indeed happy and content in their world, I'm happy for them, even though I might not understand it.
Yeah. One of the things I bumped up against right away in kind of playing this out, again, coming from my own little background, I really hadn't thought it through until I started to talk to people. And then I realized, there's a big cultural play here. In certain cultures, shining is expected to be moderated. If you are really loyal to your culture, like the filial culture of Japanese, for example, then you're not going to one up your dad. Hey, pa, you made a mistake on that. You
Well,
know,
I grew up in that environment too. But yeah, it could be cultural. And how big an influence does culture have on us and where we find ourselves? And is it harder to evolve from certain cultures as opposed to others?
right? And ultimately, if they value something, like if the culture doesn't value a woman shining, for example, and you grew up as a woman in this culture, you have to come to terms with how do I moderate my talent? How do I moderate my genius in ways that don't offend the powers that be? Because then people crack back on you, and it can be pretty nasty.
Well, it can. You know, I was at the beginning of my professional career, I was very young and I didn't know what I was doing, but I was successful. And part of that success was based on, if we go back to the late 70s, early 80s, that my team were women executives because they prided themselves in being the best that they could. And because I accepted them and because I worked on with them, utilized them, they helped me. You know, they helped me evolve. They helped me learn. And back then, people just had a really hard time dealing with that, nor could they understand it. But see, that's their shine was always apparent when I met them, when I saw them, when I talked to them about the task at hand. And they could have been ostriches. I would have utilized them.
That's interesting because I think that's something that women have always had to deal with is sometimes the only way they can score their shine points is through a proxy man. I mean, think of the best of the best of geisha or the best of courtesans. They could be at a table full of men. They could be like 8 men at the table sitting with this woman, and each one of these men would feel like they were the smartest, sexiest, most well-spoken person in the room, simply because of this woman's incredible skill at shading how they do it and supporting what they do. And that's shining.
Yeah.
They just don't give credit for it. It's kind of like hidden.
Well, you know, you and I are both sincere respecters of women and their roles on this planet. And I don't think we've ever questioned their capabilities because of their sex.
One of the real eye openers to me, long time ago, was I would be in a group with a mixed gender group, just regular like students or whatever, and there'd be a woman and she'd be talking and holding up her end of the conversation and being a part of it, and I'd be like, you know what, this chick's pretty smart. She's got something going, and then I would get in a smaller group, a more safer group, a more intimate group, and maybe lots of times when I was in groups of girls, they forget I was a guy, right? And I would get like the insider stuff. But I would get in these smaller groups, and the filter would come off, and then that person who I thought was like, yeah, they're pretty smart, they're brilliant,
Yeah.
they're beyond brilliant, and you're just sitting there with your mouth open, going, and I would roll up on them later and say, why don't you share this with the rest of the world? And they would explain it to me, right? And they would say, well, the rest of the world doesn't really want this, and ultimately, I'd rather give them what they want than face the negative consequences for being who I am. And that's an interesting side.
Well, it's accepting the easier path. They're predetermined this is going to be an easier path for me, and I think in some cases it was. But it always mystified me too, Scott. Well, and then I grew up in my family when I was a child. When the men sat at the table and the women sat at the table, there was no question where the highest intellect was, and it was not the men. So I grew up in that. I knew that my mother was extremely bright. I knew that my sister was an unbelievable student, and my dad and I just got stuff done.
Yeah, 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 yeah. As a relational guy who loves the company of women, my mantra has always been, it's better to be happy than to be right.
Well, I don't know if I'd say that, but you're right. I do wish happiness on everybody, and not everybody can't be right. So don't make that a criteria of happiness.
Well, no, and anytime you're at the point of having to insist, it's probably just time to take a deep breath and relax,
Yeah, yeah. In the words of Snagglepuss, exit stage left.
right? Now, here's an angle. Do you think there's a generational difference in terms of shining? The reason I'm bringing this up is, are my dear friends the millennials? They've always said, well, like, why should I shine? You're not paying me enough money. Or why should I shine? This is a boring job. And I never really, as a Generation X guy, I'm like the oldest guy in Generation X. I never really even thought of that. It's like the external contexts weren't allowed to take away my beauty. Weren't allowed to my talent. And and plus, I don't care if I'm not getting paid. I'm going to show you what I can do. And it's interesting to hear a different generation feel very differently about that.
Maybe they're shining in different aspects of their life, because I think that's an important aspect. Let's hope they're proud of something or proud of their contribution. The millennials have, to my generation, are known to have viewpoints that they're very loud about and very demonstrative about. So they do have passions, but work. To keep the ball spinning, somebody's got to do the work.
Yeah, we actually have done shows on quiet quitting.
Yeah.
Where you're basically just keeping the seat warm, and that seems something that generation is much more comfortable. And again, not in kind of a judgmental way. That's how they roll, and to them, that's their line of fare.
Well,
And to me, it's like, it gets me a little bit because I'm thinking, you're diminishing yourself,
yes.
and you've got a good reason for that, perhaps, and it's your choice, and that's for sure. But but can you really, if you drive at quarter speed all the time, are you going to be able to floor it and really go? Have you tested your top end speed when you need it?
Well, or do they find contentment in being nothing more than a consumer? And as you talk about sitting at the table with people, there's always people at the table that are just what I always used to say in business, we're sucking the oxygen out of the room. That meant they were there for no apparent purpose. And see, that's been around for a long time because
Oh yeah.
I go back to the early 80s. Allied Signal was famous for when I would have to go in and do a presentation that there would be 20 people in the room and I would go, who the hell are they? What are they doing here? Well, what they were doing was eating the donuts.
Hey, they were free, right?
But every once in a while, one of those oxygen breathers, consumers of the room, would be a smartass. And then I would,
And not in a productive way.
right, and I would just stop. I said, all right, let's all introduce ourselves and go around the room and explain why we're here. And at that moment in time, 10 of those people would leave. They were offended. And
Yeah,
I just had never experienced that before. But there's micro business
microclimates.
systems, yeah,
Yeah,
of that behavior. There's a big organization here where they pride themselves in being put out to pasture, but still drawing a paycheck. And when it's put out to pasture, they're not doing anything. And who's paying for that?
right.
The rest of society.
Yeah, very, very true. I mean, that was one of when my roles changed in my career. That was one of the challenges I put on myself was, how do I make this as important as everything I was doing a day ago? And how do I add my spice to it? How do I add my shine to it and make it that way? You know what? One of the things that bothered me about meetings, and just kind of get this off my chest,
Okay.
when I was called to a meeting that I had to be in, and we were talking about things that had nothing to do with me, and the problem I had was that I would listen carefully and begin to contribute, and that was counterproductive.
Were you doing that to hear yourself talk? I find myself doing that from time to time.
No, I was like, hey, I got this figured out. Why don't we try this? And it was like somebody else's problem, and they're like, hey, you know what? Just stay out of my problem.
You were just there for eye candy.
You know what? I had, I'll drop her name. I had a woman who sat across from me who was an analyst named Pat Yarnell, and she developed a system. And she would we sat right across from each other so she could see me. Every time I got that look in my face, like I was about to jump in and say something, I'd look at her and she'd give me a look. And sometimes that look said, yeah, go for it. And sometimes that look, don't you dare.
Please don't.
And that was her shining, by the way. That was her kind of intuitive analysis of how to best get to the solution of something without getting lost in a morass of other things.
Or maybe it was her analysis of how to best get out of that meeting. Because maybe she
Well,
felt she was there for the same reason you were.
getting out of meetings is not a bad thing because then you can get back to getting stuff done.
Well, absolutely. I can tell I'll tell an old story on me for a nonprofit. Now I'll drop the name. It was Ducks Unlimited. We were doing a
Yeah.
a national event, and I was co-chaired with a golden child of Intel, very adept, very bright, very organized individual. We had to go to the national convention and make a presentation to the National Events Committee, and this was in Las Vegas at Caesar's
Did you
Palace.
wait? Did you use a little humor to maybe quack?
No, I should have, but I didn't. And so we go into this room, and I'm staring out at supposedly the cream of the crop, and the executive director. And I'm trying to remember who the executive. Jack Connolly was the executive director back then, and I knew Jack really well, and he was very appreciative of us coming there to do it. And I was looking at a bunch of blank stares, and this room of the cream were all hung over from the night before, and we did our presentation with charts, and Ross Perot would have been proud. We had charts and arrows and all kinds of economic projections and things like that, and what we needed from national to pull this off. And it was over, and the executive director called for a vote, and they approved it. And he came up to me afterwards. He said, "What did you think of that?" I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, "It's just like everywhere else. No matter where you go, there's only three people that need to be at the table, and everybody else is just sucking oxygen out of the room." And he was 40 years older than I was. He smiled and he laughed and he said, "Hey, that's pretty good perception." Why did we have to come here and do this? But it was part of the song and dance.
Well, and it's a good example of task expectation versus how you determine where you're going to set your mix to shine.
Oh, exactly.
In a situation like that, it's just let the eyes glaze back and vote for whatever the boss wants.
No, exactly. And just my shining was being there. And I wasn't old enough or bright enough to recognize that. But he came up to make sure that I understood that afterwards.
How many encores did you get?
I got no encores. I did have people that sat through that presentation later come up to me and introduce themselves. And I
Hey,
was,
that counts.
yeah, I guess. But it was a, here's a word I have trouble saying all the time, epiphany for me. I'll be damned. Why am I here? And I catch myself saying that a lot, which I'm sure you did when you sat in those meetings years ago.
Oh yeah. No, well, after I figured out that my job wasn't to find some hidden insight, even though it was none of my business, and it took a while.
Well, there again, you being an acquired taste, you brought a perspective to things that others didn't. And a lot of those people just wanted to get through the day, just wanted to get through the meeting. And you were trying to make a difference. Go imagine.
As Robert Palmer, I was looking for clues.
Robert Palmer. Oh my God. Simply irresistible. You don't think you were, or
Right?
maybe that's why you were there.
I don't think so. I'll give you my favorite obscure Robert Palmer, Johnny and Mary. Johnny's always running around trying to find Sir. Remember that one? It
No,
was a
I
good song.
don't remember.
Okay, everybody's gonna run to look that one up afterwards. A really good song. It's an
Okay.
interesting song about it's a good song about shining, to be honest, because it was a song about people in the '80s who were trying to be as real as they could and as valid as they could, and running into kind of brick walls of how their own self kind of limited them. It was a good song.
It must have been the late 80s, Scott.
Yes, yes,
It wasn't the early 80s. It must have been an evolutionary period I missed.
it was right. It was it was as Robert Palmer was transitioning from punk to pop.
Okay. Okay. And he was good at that. Well, at least his girls were good at it. That guy made a career out of the female models he hired to dance behind him.
They were shining.
Yeah, they were. They were simply irresistible.
And to me, it would be like to live in a world where everybody was shining, and half the time that was pointing out to me how inadequate I was. That would be an okay world for me. I don't mind other people's brilliance. I really respect it and try to learn from it as much as anything.
Yeah, but for them to shine, they can't point out your problems. For them to truly
No, they can't.
shine, yeah.
But when they're shining, inside of me, my problems become obvious, right? It's like, ooh, it's. We were talking about books a couple of weeks ago. It's just like those books where I have to stop and look up stuff in the middle of the book. I have to stop and say, did this really happen, or what does this word actually mean? Or some people kind of get gnarly at that. Like, hey, I was cruising through this book, and all of a sudden you threw up this roadblock, and I had to deal with something. I'm like, you just took me a step farther than I would have gone if I hadn't read it that way.
Oh, that's true. And that happens to me all the time. And I will trying to find that word that they're electing to use, and then, but sadly, I'll spend 5 minutes afterwards wondering why the hell they used that specific word and wasted this 5 minutes of my life.
I
But
am
that,
so good at I am so good at letting people have the discretion to do stuff like that. I am. Seriously, I never go back and say, well, geez, you could have said it this way. Um, I think because people did that to me, and that would always kind of get my hackles up. I said, well, I did it that way for a reason, okay? I wasn't like just mindlessly doing stuff.
right, don't tarnish my shine.
Exactly. I would love for people to feel safe enough to really let their shine out, because I think the world would actually transform in some really cool ways.
Oh, absolutely. If they evolution is important for people. I mean, if they find themselves middle aged and they're caught in a rut, they need to do something. They're missing too much of life. And the first thing is to, you know, feel proud of where they are, no matter where they are. Feel proud of that. If you're homeless on the streets of LA and your box is a little bit better than your neighbors, take some pride in that. It's all about perspective. And as you move forward with that type of attitude, things will start to happen for you.
Yeah, that's really, really sound reasoning. One of the hardest things I had to deal with, my first adult crisis, if you will, was as a kid, I always thought, well, I can't wait to be a grown up. Because when I'm a grown up, I'll be done. I won't have to learn more stuff. I won't have to like up there's like a graduation thing. And you're graduating from being a child, you'll be grown up, it'll be you just switch into glide. And as you and I probably both know, I'm 62 and I haven't found glide yet.
No, it's just different. It's different. When I grew up, I was told, when I asked my parents, or my mother in particular, how old do I have to be to do that? When you're 32. And that was this pat answer for everything. Well, lo and behold, when my 32nd birthday came around, I let everybody know now I can do whatever I want. And that was my little evolution. But that was a good, I'd been in the professional world for 20 years. And that was a
You
good
were
time.
legit. You were legit a good son because to hold out like from 18 to 32, just on your mom's kind of like laying it out there that this is when you can do this. That's remarkably mature.
Well, let's not kid ourselves. I at least adapted that persona, but I may not have been the holdout I should have been.
Nice. So 30 and 32 is a good age. But I think a lot of this is how people who develop us, our mentors, are the people who love us, recognize our shine and then not only give us space to get it out, but help us to develop it, help us to see stuff that we might not even notice about, stuff that makes us really special.
Well, and Scott, I don't think they necessarily have to love us to do that. I had some mentors that I wouldn't say loved me, but certainly wanted the best for me and put a lot of energy into making me a better person at that moment. And I had unlimited potential to be a better person for the vast majority of my life.
I could have been a contender.
Yeah, I could have been. That's a good way to put it. I could have been.
I'm like my framework on that is this: whatever you choose to put attention on is what you love. It's not what you say you love, but whenever you take your attention, which is your most precious gift, it's really the only thing that you have kind of immediate control over your whole life. So whatever you choose to attend to, whatever you choose to focus on, that's kind of that's the tell in the poker hand of life. That's what you really love. And so that's why I count mentors as people who love me. Because if they took a second to actually attend to me, to focus their attention on how I might be a better human being, that's a gift.
Well, absolutely. And, sometimes we don't recognize that that was their purpose for us until we get much older. Why that person came into our life, why that person took some time to attend to us, so to speak.
But that's a lot like looking at clouds, right? You look at clouds and one person sees a dragon, the other person sees a puppy dog, the other person sees a cloud. The universe, did the universe throw somebody at you like in that moment just for you to personally develop in a certain way, or was it happenstance, or was it the right place, right time? And it's really hard to sort that stuff out.
Well, that's why the cloud analogy is perfect because I look at clouds from both sides now, give and take, but still somehow. Yeah, absolutely. And even with whatever your core beliefs are, I believe there are no coincidences. And if people come into your life, there's a purpose. Hopefully, it's a good purpose.
Yeah, and I could go with that. I don't think about it that way very often. I think about it more as everything's happening kind of randomly, and then sometimes random stuff lines up in a certain way that you see it better and you can uh, use it to develop yourself as a human being. But that has to be a priority. I mean, you have to get up in the morning and think about how can I develop as a human being? I've got limited time frame. I've got the morals and the values that I was given, as a child. I've got what I've learned as an adult. I've got some critical thinking skills, and all of it's suspect,
Yeah.
right? It's like
Yes.
I'm as goofy as the next person. And with that in mind, how do I make it better today? How do I level up?
Well, better for myself and better for those around me who I love. And you talk about the gifts, but love is a primary one. Allowing people to love you is a gift you give them. Loving others is certainly a gift you share with them, but and that's probably to me the most important shine.
You know, you talk about it that way, and it occurs to me, let's roll it forward. Let's run it back. Let's take next week's show and dive into love. Let's do a tribute to Billy Joe, a dry, dusty Delta day. No, I'm sorry, a tribute to Tina Turner.
Well, there you go.
What's love got to do with it? And we can kind of go on and kind of build on and explore how the most special of shines, if you will, has the limitations, the things that make it harder for people just to love open-heartedly all day long, and then the magic that can happen when people have the courage, and the safety and the feeling of openness to really be that kind to themselves and others.
Well, and to their pets and to their life and everything. That sounds like a great idea, Scott. Why don't we dig into that? Why don't we do a tribute to Tina?
We'll do that, and I'll throw it out this way, listeners. If you've got stuff, because I'm always going out interviewing people about these shows, so I'm always going out and talking to all the the dog park people. I'm talking to strangers. I talked to a person who has schizophrenia about this show today, and you know what they said? I want to shine enough to be safe and to avoid other people's attentions. Because whenever I come to people's attentions with what we would call delusions, I think the better way to say it is non-consensual reality, then that person gets hammered, and sometimes even gets their freedoms taken away. So when we're talking about it, they say, well, my best shine is a shine that nobody notices. Because when people notice, bad things happen.
Wow, a learned behavior that I've never experienced, but a great
Yeah,
place.
it was an eye opener to me. It was something like, oh, you know, lay low and be safe. People in really discordant, chaotic households do that too. They may have amazing gifts, but their best gift is camouflage.
Well, yeah, I experienced some of that as a child as my parents were getting divorced, but I got through it. And I had a support team around me to help me do that. But again, I was not a small child. I was 15.
Yeah, yeah.
So we can all
No,
relate. We can all relate to one
go ahead.
another. We can all relate to one another if we put some energy towards relating to one another.
And then it's interesting with all the commonalities and overlaps in all of our life experiences, how some things really affected some people in some ways, and other things affected other people in other ways. And so we end up with all these kind of different types of behaviors and different types of spins on things, even though we both gone through divorces, or even though we got our butts kicked in wrestling or whatever it was.
Well, absolutely, Scott. And why don't you give us a final thought, and we'll put this one in the bag, and we'll come back and talk about Queen Tina. What was her? She must have been knighted or something.
I can't remember if she was an English citizen and got knighted, but she was hanging out with that crowd. She was Elton John and David Bowie, and they were all the real songster people, right? The people who could really work magic, not only with the music but with the performance. And that group of people did some wonderful things, and Tina really inspired almost a generation of performers with how she could work a song on stage. So
Well,
we're going to do a tribute to Tina Turner. We're going to talk about what's love got to do with it. And this may actually launch a series, because we may get like into like Philadelphia. We maybe get brotherly love, And we may figure out that we need to spend a half hour talking about brotherly love, or eros. We may figure out that we need to talk about intimate relational love, and that may be our best listened to show ever, right? A
What
little salaciousness to get the market going.
can we do a tribute to Meatloaf? Life is a lemon, and I want my money back.
Yeah, yeah. Listeners, feel free to post your refund requests in the chat underneath us, um, and also if you've got stuff you want us to think about or talk about when we talk about what's love got to do with it, drop that stuff in there, because that level of engagement, again, it pushes us to develop better as human beings, and that's kind of the mutuality of this thing.
Right,
We're throwing
absolutely.
this out here for you guys. You throw back stuff to us, and we all get better. None of this trickle down stuff.
Right, right. And people need to recognize that this is therapeutic for Scott and I both. It helps us, and we look forward to this each week.
Luna's one step up on the cat tree, and she's nodding her head yes.
Well,
Even
and
her.
once you quit bashing psychics, she left the camera alone. I noticed.
I was hoping she'd go back to sleep. I'm still holding the camera just in case.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Everybody, this has been Just in Case and Scott bringing you American Consciousness. Thanks for joining us. Remember, additional information and links provided in this video is read more. Today is the day to subscribe to this channel. Please learn more about Scott when time permits.